Welcome to When Family Matters Become Legal Matters.
Hello and welcome to When Family Matters Become Legal Matters, where we help you navigate the legal steps needed to protect your family, your future, and your legacy. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and I am joined by Betsy Holton, founder of Holton Law Group, with years of experience guiding families through estate planning, elder law, and special needs planning. Betsy is here to share the practical advice and trusted strategies that turn complicated legal issues into peace of mind. Betsy, welcome. Great to have you here.
Hi, Kevin. It's good to be back.
Yeah, I'm excited to unpack this a little bit more. We kind of talked about trusts and wills. You gave us sort of a broad strokes view of what they are, how they differ, but we're going to go into more detail today. So let's go back one quick step in case anybody missed the first one. What's the basic difference between a will and trust, and why is it important to really know the difference?
Absolutely. So I like to always think about the will versus the trust in two different ways. First of all, the will only applies after you pass away. Okay. And because the will is this contract that you write with yourself that you want the judge to enforce, it only can happen if you've passed away. So that means anything that happens before you while you're still alive, the will is of no consequence whatsoever.
Okay.
Now, each state has a rule as to how a person's assets can be transferred from their name to the names of their heirs or their beneficiaries. And so if you don't have a will, that's called intestate succession. And of course, that means that the state is going to determine how that happens. The beauty of your will is that you get the opportunity to make sure that those assets go to only the people that you want them to go to. Okay. And the judge is going to be the one who enforces that for you.
Okay.
The trust, however, is much broader and it has many, many more benefits. The first benefit is that you don't have to wait until you pass away to experience the benefits of your trust. If you become incapacitated in any form or fashion, your trustee, who you will name, will take over handling everything for you. If you have a home and a mortgage, your trustee can now take care of your mortgage. If you have rental property, your trustee can now go pick up the rent from the rental property or handle any of that. Now, if you have a business, it may require some additional planning, but on the basic forefront, the trustee just steps up and takes over when you're incapacitated. Then, if you pass away, the trustee holds all of those assets, so there's no reason for us to go see the judge to let the judge be in control. You are able to manage all of that on your own, or the trustee would handle all of that for you without any intervention from the court at all. So your trust and your will can kind of be considered as the now versus then type of planning. The trust is something that you put in place now so that you can have access to your assets now. Your trustee can have access to your assets now versus then when you have a will, then that's when the court appoints someone to take over. Now, be mindful that if you have a will, you are going to be required to go to court. Your family or your loved ones will be required to go to court after you pass away. So even if you have a will and we're not going to be following the state rules for you, you are still going to be required to go through a court process so that that will can be valid and the distributions can be made in that manner. With the trust, you can avoid a court process altogether.
So how do I know if I need a trust or not? I mean, it seems like everybody probably could use a will, but maybe not everybody needs a trust. How do I know?
Yes. So typically, you want to be prepared for what happens before you pass away. And that's one of the benefits of the trust. Now, there are some other documents that you can put in your plan that may be able to handle some of those, but the trust is going to be a much more secure and a much more widely accepted document by financial institutions, by other parties that your family members may have to deal with. The other thing is the court process is unpredictable.
Mm.
It is long and it can be quite frustrating because you are not in control at all. The judge is always in control. And the difference, as we stated, between that will and that trust is that you are not subjected to the public access to your documents, because that happens when you go through probate, because anything that's filed in the court is public.
Right.
And you also don't have to go through the entire process that is required. I can tell you that if our trust is set up properly and we have identified all of the assets that need to be in the trust that are being managed by a trustee, the process takes mere days to
Oh,
transfer
wow.
assets from one person to another. The probate process, will or no will, you are not going to get out of a court process or court proceeding in less than 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I
But
remember talking
that's
about that a little
even
bit.
unusual. Most of the time, it's many, many more months than that.
Yeah, I think so many people think they don't when they don't know anything about trust. You think of trusts for rich people, trust trust fund babies, like all that kind of stuff. Like those are the kind of things people think about, but that's really not what it is.
Yes, but it's also a really good thing, because if you, have minor children, then a trust is so important, because you don't want to have, again, because yes, the court has a remedy for everything, but do
Mhm.
you want to use the court remedy? And so if you have assets and you have minor children and something happens to you, then we have to go through what's called a guardianship or conservatorship and place those funds into a court restricted account that you have to ask the court for permission to take care of your own children. Of course, you're not here, but whoever's responsible for your children, they would always have to ask the court's permission to receive those assets, where you can put in place now a plan and a process and the directives that you would like to give to that person if they are responsible for your children, on how they would spend the assets that you leave behind for them.
And another thing that's important to note, because I've heard of this before, people having a trust but never putting anything in it.
Yes.
So you need to make sure that you put stuff in the trust. Just having a trust doesn't do you much good.
Absolutely, absolutely. We run into that so many times, and our firm truly believes in making sure that your trust, the legal term is called funded, but we like to make sure that your trust is funded. What that simply means is, if you have real estate and you want to avoid the process of going through a probate process to transfer that real estate, you need to have the title to that real estate placed in the trust. If you have other assets, you may want to name a beneficiary. But what happens if that beneficiary passes before you and you have not had an opportunity to make the change? It's
Mhm.
very important that you let that financial institution or whatever contract that you have, let them know that you have the trust, and maybe have the trust listed as the contingent beneficiary. Now, there are some people who really want the trust to be the beneficiary of everything and have everything come into that trust at the, together, and then make distributions out of the trust that way. But you don't have to do that. It's important, though, that any financial institution, any insurance company, anyone that you're dealing with on an individual basis is aware that you have the trust, so that they can make the proper adjustments to their account with you. Because if you don't do that, you've almost negated the whole reason that you set up the trust in the first place, because guess what? Now we're going to have to go through the probate court to get all of that cleared up and straightened out, so that those assets can be transferred.
I know you specialize, or you work with some special needs kids and things like that. How do trusts help families with who have maybe very young children, or special needs dependents or vulnerable heirs?
Sure, sure. So, as we were talking earlier, I was saying that if you pass away and you have young children and you have insurance and you have some other assets that are now going to be their assets because you're not here, they obviously cannot manage their own affairs.
Right.
So the court has put in place a process where they will appoint someone who may not be the person that you would have wanted to be over them too. Remember, the court's just going to look at paper and see who looks good on paper. And if they look good on paper, they may appoint that person. May very well be the last person that you want. If you don't want your sister-in-law in charge of your kids, then you need to make sure you put a plan in place to make sure that your brother takes care of your kids, right?
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, so that's kind of a side note. But yes, so you definitely want to make sure that that's in place. And so you would allow for times and amounts of distribution and the criteria that the trustee would need to distribute money on behalf of the children. The other beauty with the trust is for individuals who have special needs. A lot of times, people who have special needs receive need-based benefits. Those benefits are usually based on, like I said, they're need based. And so they have income and asset limitations on them. But if you place them properly into a trust, the assets are still there to assist them with their quality of life. I have firsthand experience with that because I have a special needs daughter who's now 31 years old. And so we have her assets in a special needs trust, and she still receives the benefits from being able to not pay for the expensive medicine that she needs on a monthly basis. If we were to go through the assets that we have available for her, she would run out of money very quickly just taking care of her medicine. So that's one of the reasons but she's able to now enjoy a fairly decent quality of life because we're able to use those funds for those types of things. So the government will only allow you to use the government money that they provide to you for just your housing and your food, right? So if you wanted to, say, take a cruise, which is my daughter's favorite activity, there would be no money available for that. But
Right.
we put money aside for her a long time ago. And so that money she's able to still have funds available to do that. And that's a unique situation, but there are many times that you have an individual who may qualify for government based assistance and they may inherit money. Well, we don't want them to lose all of their government assistance because if you are paying those benefits out of your pocket, you will run out of money very quickly. So we
Right.
want to set up a process that is approved through the government, through the IRS, that allows you to place those monies in a separate account and be prepared. And also, if you have someone who may not necessarily be on a need-based system, but maybe just vulnerable to those people out there that we call predators, right? You want to be able to protect them by placing their assets into a trust so that those un unfriendlies
The unsavory act, the
yeah,
bad
they're
actors.
not
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get in and take advantage of the individual. And,
Yeah.
there's some other planning techniques that trusts are very beneficial for when you have blended families, making sure that if one parent passes away, if there's not direction, then the children of the other party can be left out. And so you just want to make sure that all of those different scenarios are addressed and covered. And the trust gives you the opportunity to do that because most of the state laws do not address those specific situations.
Right. Boy, I never would have thought you had a 31-year-old daughter.
Oh, thanks.
So, can you talk about? I know there's a difference between a revocable and irrevocable trust, correct? Can you kind of describe the difference between those and when someone would want them?
So the revocable trust is a trust that allows you, once you place an asset into the trust, you are able to remove that asset from the trust. A lot of times it's usually just used as a method to avoid probate and a method to make distributions in a way that you would really want them to be made, which, obviously is going to be different than the state's plan that's already written. For instance, I mean, most people, well, I won't say most people, but a lot of people do like to leave money to charities. And so the state does not have any type of plan that would allow you to do that.
Right.
So those are some of the benefits of the revocable trust. And it's usually fairly sufficient for most of the trust planning needs. However, in the case of the special needs trust that we just discussed, and making sure that we protect someone who may be vulnerable or something of that nature, then sometimes the irrevocable trust comes into play because it is not only a probate avoidance method, but it also can be a credit shelter, and it can also protect those individuals from those who may be able to manipulate the trustee, the beneficiary, because of course the trustee in those trusts will be an independent party. It would not be the same person. So, kind of backing up, the revocable trust, you can be your own grantor, meaning the person who starts the trust. You can be the trustee, the person who's in charge of all of the assets in the trust. And you can also be the beneficiary, the person who receives the benefit of the trust. And of course, if you pass away, you would list the ones who would be in charge to receive all of those assets at that time. In the irrevocable trust, in order for it to meet those criteria to take advantage of all of those great text and credit shelter things, you cannot be the trustee and the beneficiary, because if you still have control over all of those assets, then those individuals will still be able to come in and get access to the trust to satisfy those debt. So it's a little more complicated, and each one is done kind of on a case-by-case basis. There are very few situations where a person requires an irrevocable trust, but they may want one because of some of the planning that they would like to do down the road.
So we threw a lot of information, a lot of terms at people throughout this episode. So
I know.
but I think it makes a lot of sense. But for anyone who's like, this makes sense, but I don't know what I need. What's the
Sure.
best way for them to figure that out? What's the best way that you can help them?
Yes, absolutely. So it requires us sitting down and talking about what is important to you and your family. What are your goals? What do you really want the trust for? If you're just wanting to avoid the probate process, absolutely a revocable trust is probably all that you need to take care of that. But if you have complex business dealings and you want to really set your family up to not have to be concerned about creditors and be concerned about being vulnerable or anything of that nature, then we can discuss, what ways an irrevocable trust could help and benefit your family in the future.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to When Family Matters Become Legal Matters. If today's conversation was helpful, please subscribe to our channel. We love having you here. We've got lots of great information that's going to be coming your way. So share it with someone who you might think needs it. For more resources or to connect with Betsy and the Holton Law Group team, if you're in Florida, visit Holton Law Group FL as in Florida.com. And if you're in Texas, it's DFW.trustandwills.com. Betsy, great chatting with you again. Looking forward to learning lots more from you.
Thanks, Kevin. Looking forward to speaking with you again, too.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.